So last week, I saw Wuthering Heights, and we gotta talk. Initially, I planned to do a standard review of this movie, but after seeing the film myself and seeing how polarizing the reactions are, I think there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had and a much needed investigation. So in this video, I want to break down all of the most controversial decisions made within the production of this movie. Who was in charge of these decisions, why these decisions were made, what the filmmaker and cast and crew's responses were to the controversy, and how these decisions affected the film narratively and thematically compared to the book, as well as the film's financial performance and what it says about audiences and film culture. And the way I want to present this is through a timeline from the very first announcement of the film all the way to the film's release. And I'll keep this video spoiler free in case you haven't seen the film or read the book. So here's what we'll talk about in this video in this particular order. The first announcement of the film, the casting announcement and Backlash, the casting director's response to the Backlash, the test screening leaks, the deleted scene, the teaser trailer controversy, the filmmaker's first response to the casting Backlash, the full trailer controversy, Margot Robbie's response to the casting Backlash, Jacob Elordi's comments on his casting, and then the release of this movie with Emerald, Margot, and Jacob's latest responses and some analysis on how these decisions played out artistically compared to the book, as well as the financial performance of the film, and so much more. Hope you enjoy. And as this video goes along, you will likely have some strong opinions or interesting theories, so please, don't be afraid to speak your mind in the comments. I'm dying to hear some perspectives. Let's begin. July 12th, 2024, Emerald Fennell announces she's adapting Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights is a classic gothic fiction tragedy novel known to be a masterpiece in Victorian literature. The announcement was made on Twitter with some original artwork, including a line from the novel, "Be with me always, take any form, drive me mad." And at this moment, the response was really positive from fans of Emerald Fennell and fans of the book. Fennell had just come off Saltburn, which in many ways paid homage to gothic fiction with its extravagant gothic set design, and its use of horror, romance, and melodrama to explore issues of social class, shifting romantic power dynamics, and family lineage, which are all relevant themes in the Wuthering Heights novel. However, just 2 months later, the reactions took a hard turn. September 23rd, 2024, Fennell announces her cast. So in an announcement through Deadline, Emerald Fennell announced her two leads, Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie, with Margot Robbie also producing under her company, Lucky Chap. And this is where the backlash began, in two ways. Firstly, the fans of the book weren't too pleased with the casting of Margot Robbie as the female lead character, Catherine Earnshaw, because in the book, she's a teenager for the majority of the story, and so much of her personality and character development revolves around her youth and sense of self-discovery as she approaches adulthood. But the announcement that really stole the show, not in a good way, was the casting of Jacob Elordi. Casting Elordi as the male lead character, Heathcliff, was problematic because, as you likely know, the character in the book is a man of color. There are various lines in the book that describe him as dark-skinned and a gypsy, which today is an offensive term, but at the time was used to describe Romani people of northern Indian descent. He was also described as a lascar, another now outdated term, which at the time referred to an Indian sailor. Another line from the book also describes his skin as dark, almost as if it came from the devil. And by these lines, what you'll notice is they're all descriptions used very purposefully. They're all used to categorize or vilify or separate the character from the rest of the characters. And this isn't because the author, Emily Bronte, is closed-minded. It's actually quite the opposite. It's because Heathcliff's skin color plays an integral role in his feeling of outsidership, placelessness, and marginalization. And that element of the character plays an integral role into an even greater theme of human nature versus cultural conditioning, and many other themes. But I'll wait to discuss that in more depth later in this video because we're only in September 2024. Maybe as we push forward later in this video, we'll get a more valid reason for why Emerald's made this choice. April 26, 2025, the casting director responds. So in a report from Deadline, we find out that Wuthering Heights casting director Kamal Cochran was the first to respond to the casting backlash. And here's her response Deadline quoted when she was asked at the Sands Film Festival. There was one Instagram comment that said, "The casting director should be shot. But just wait till you see it, and then you can decide whether you want to shoot me or not. But you really don't need to be accurate. It's just a book. That is not based on real life. It's all art." There's definitely going to be some English lit fans that are not going to be happy. Wait until you see the set design, because that is even more shocking. And as you could guess, this answer only added more fuel to the fire because of how dismissive and careless people felt like she was being with this answer. And I can't help but add, especially as a woman of color herself and a professional in the creative industry, it's pretty shocking for her to say that it's just a book, especially considering the legacy and influence and ambition that that book took when it was written by Emily Bronte. It was completely different than anything else of its time. Very challenging. But then again, Cormac Cochrane did say, wait till the movie comes out, so maybe she has a point. Let's continue to move forward. August 4th, 2025, the test screening leaks. So in a report from World of Real, the reactions for an early test screening of Wuthering Heights were revealed. And there was one common complaint: the film's hypersexuality. And if you've seen the film, you'll know that a lot of the scenes described by the viewers have been included in the film, except for one very graphic and very provocative scene. And if I describe it vividly, I feel like my video's gonna get flagged, so maybe I can describe it in very softened euphemism type language that will get the message across while also not being as graphic as the scene actually is. So let's give this a try. So at the very beginning of the film, a man is being hanged publicly, and while being hanged, he reaches a sort of climax. And the release of this climax gets the crowd very strangely excited. So excited to the point where a nun actually gets kind of hands-on with the victim even after he is dead. And if you've seen the film, you know that there's a much tamer version of this scene in the movie very early on. But I don't want to get into specific spoilers, and I think this speaks to a much greater issue about the film, but I want to hold that till later on in the video when we get to the film's release. So for now, let's move forward into a very big day in the timeline when things didn't seem like they could get any worse. September 3rd, 2025, the release of the teaser. So on September 3rd, Warner Brothers released the official teaser trailer, as well as the official poster and marketing material. And the reaction wasn't too hot. Viewers immediately sensed a shallowness and misrepresentation of the original book all across the teaser and press material. And they were not afraid to express this on social media and the YouTube comments. The teaser was criticized for its overt eroticism, shamelessly inaccurate wardrobe, distastefully miscast leads, and ignorant hyperfixation on the romance, which is only one component of a much greater story. The whole thing made it feel like an exploitation of the classic novel just to sell a trendy romance led by white A-listers for mass appeal. And while that Charli XCX track, Everything Is Romantic, is a really great song, its inclusion in the teaser only emphasized the tone-deaf direction of the marketing. And the silence from filmmaker Fennell can only go on for so much longer. Until now. September 28th, 2025, Fennell finally responds. So when speaking at the Bronte Women's Writing Festival, Emerald Fennell speaks up for the first time about her decision to cast her two leads. And I'll take the words directly from The Guardian, who reported on her response. "I've been obsessed. I've been driven mad by this book," she said. "I know that if somebody else made it, I'd be furious. It's very personal material for everyone. It's very illicit. The way we relate to the characters is very private. It is an act of extreme masochism to try and make a film of something that means this much to you. There's an enormous amount of sadomasochism in this book. There's a reason people were deeply shocked by it. Working on it has been a kind of masochistic exercise," she said, "because I love it so much and it can't love me back, and I have to live with that. Jacob looked exactly like the illustrations of Heathcliff on the first book that I read. Margot is not like anyone I've ever met, and I think that's what I felt like with Kathy." Describing the wily protagonist as a sadist who likes to pinch you, Fennell added that Robbie is the type of person who, like Kathy, could get away with anything. "I think honestly she could commit a killing spree, and nobody would mind." For the skeptics, Fennell said that part of the novel's enduring power is that no one is in agreement about any element of it. And she added, "I can't make something for everyone." So personally, I'm not really a fan of this response, and I'll explain why. I kind of feel like you can break this response into three sections: how it made her feel to adapt the story, why she chose Jacob Elordi, and why she chose Margot Robbie. So in the first part, she's ultimately saying that it is a masochistic experience to adapt this book, which means that she has to be painfully vulnerable to honestly bring this vision to life. Then she says she chose Jacob Elordi because he looked a lot like the illustrations that she grew up with. And then she says that she chose Margot Robbie because her natural essence is so unhateable that she could make a sadistic character like Catherine worth investing in for viewers. So I'm not really sure how that need to be vulnerable relates to that reason to select Jacob Elordi and that reason to select Margot Robbie. But I do have one theory on how I could put those together, and I'd be interested to get your take on it in the comments, so I'll explain. My theory on what she means is when creating this film, she had to dig so deeply into the most personal connection that she had with the novel and therefore find herself in the story. And to do that, she had to cast a woman that resembled something closer to herself, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman at an age closer to the age she is, which explains that departure for Catherine being a 35-year-old blonde versus a teenage brunette. And then to explain the Jacob side of things, she casts a 6'5" white male dressed to replicate the classic Hollywood iterations and the illustrations, of course, that she maybe grew up desiring. And therefore, by going against the source material that unapologetically, it does feel painfully vulnerable and risky. But of course, that's all just me theorizing, trying to step into her shoes the best way that I possibly can. And there's actually more that she has to say as we go forward in this timeline, so let's just continue to push forward. November 13th, 2025, the release of the full trailer. With this trailer, it appears that the studio heard the audience after the teaser. They scaled back on the sexuality and gave more context to the emotions, story, and characters. But what still disappointed viewers was that it doubled down on its Valentine's weekend target market with its focus on the romance, most infamously tagging the trailer with the greatest love story of all time. To the novel reading audience, the team just really seems to ignore the totality of the story and the many other elements that make it so great. But it's important to remember, trailers aren't edited by the filmmaker, they're edited by the marketing team, and sometimes the marketing can be completely different than the actual finished artistic product, so maybe there's hope. December 4th, 2025, Margot Robbie responds. For the 2026 January issue of British Vogue, Margot Robbie was asked about the Jacob Elordi whitewash controversy, and I'll pull the excerpt directly from that January issue. I saw him play Heathcliff, she says finally, and he is Heathcliff. I'd say just wait, trust me, you'll be happy. It's a character that has this lineage of other great actors who played him, from Laurence Olivier to Richard Burton and Ralph Fiennes to Tom Hardy. To be a part of that is special. He's incredible, and I believe in him so much. I honestly think he's our generation's Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm not really a big fan of this response either, because to me it's just sort of this PR way of saying, well, there have been plenty of other whitewashed iterations of the character before, and this is just another one in that line. We're carrying on that legacy. The most recent adaptation in 2011 was the first to accurately cast a man of color. So by mentioning those older portrayals, it only feels regressive. But still, the film hasn't come out yet, so maybe we just need to listen to Margot Robbie, maybe we need to trust her, so let's just continue to move forward. January 20th, 2026, Jacob Elordi comments on his casting. Okay, so in this one, I feel like I need to put an asterisk beside this response because Elordi wasn't actually specifically asked about the controversy or the whitewashing. He was featured in Vogue Australia, where he and Margot Robbie interviewed each other. And in this back and forth, Jacob discusses how it felt to accept the role of Heathcliff when Fennell offered it to him, coming off of their last collab with Saltburn. And here was his answer. I really love her. I really love her. I usually don't think about letting someone down, and I really didn't want to let her down. So the first 3 weeks, I would go home and I had the greatest amount of doubt I've ever probably had. Then, when that went away, it started to feel like Saltburn again, when I let go and relinquished a little bit, because I was holding it so tightly. Like, it's Heathcliff. It has to be Heathcliff. And then I started to understand the movie more. So as you can tell, this isn't a direct response to the controversy. He's kind of mainly talking about the pressure that he felt coming off of the success of Saltburn, which is, of course, a collaboration with Emerald Fennell. You could interpret it as him having some sort of reluctance to the racial element of the character, but that is, I guess, still like a bit of a leap. I just wanted to include it because I feel like it's the closest we see him get to that question and that topic. And finally, we've made it. February 13th, 2026, Wuthering Heights opening weekend. So the film in its first weekend opened up to very mixed reviews, but ultimately a financially successful weekend, exceeding its production budget of $80 million in just 4 days. And this makes things really interesting. So in this final section of the video, I want to take all of the new responses that Emerald, Margot, and Jacob have added now that the movie is out. Then compare everything they've said to the actual film to see if what they've said holds any kind of merit. And then in conclusion, try to uncover why this film did so well financially, despite all of the overwhelming backlash up until the release. So starting with the characters and their casting. Earlier in the video, Emerald said she cast Jacob Elordi because he looked like the illustrations she grew up with. And she had to dig into a very vulnerable, personal place adapting that character. But now that I've finally seen this character in her movie, I'm not really sensing anything that feels freshly unique or uniquely personal to her in any way. The only thing new I think this iteration of Heathcliff offers is the overt eroticism and this highly marketable sex appeal. So when I think back to Margot Robbie telling us, just wait, because it'll all make sense and it'll all be worth it, I think the sex appeal is really all she was foreshadowing. And I think the only real vulnerability Fennell described that she had to access herself earlier to create this character was her personal sexual excitement this character brought out of her when she first read the book. And at the world premiere of the film, Emerald was asked again specifically about the casting of Elordi for a character of color by The Hollywood Reporter, and this was her latest answer. I think the thing is, everyone who loves this book has such a personal connection to it. And so you can only ever kind of make the movie that you sort of imagined yourself when you read it. And I feel like this only backs up my point further that I said earlier, where I think she's just tapping into her most personal desire. And that most personal sexual desire is in the image of Jacob Elordi, even if it comes at the cost of whitewashing the character and eliminating the most pivotal themes in the novel. Especially when she also says this when discussing her inspiration for the film. I first read the book when I was 14, and it just completely cracked me open. It was just the most thrilling experience. It's the most transcendently beautiful book because of the time that I read it in my life and the nature of the book, which is so visceral. I've sort of never really stopped thinking about it. And so then, looking at turning it into a film, I wanted to reflect that first experience as best as I could. And it is kind of a sensory experience and a physical one. I think that's what Bronte is so incredible at. She gets inside you. And when it comes to Margot and Jacob's latest responses at a press interview with Joel Edgerton at Vogue Australia, Margot basically reiterated that Jacob looks like the illustrations on the books Fennell read as a teenager. And Jacob Elordi just said he was excited to work with Fennell again. But I'll let you draw your own conclusion on Jacob's casting because those are all their latest responses on him. So yes, I think Robbie, Elordi, and Fennell achieved exactly what they set out to achieve, creating a beautifully designed film that appeals to the most personal, visceral emotions and desires of a mass market. And I think the backlash was loud, but ultimately from a much smaller community of readers and possible passionate film enthusiasts. And those individuals, like me, I guess, still bought a ticket opening weekend out of this extreme burning curiosity. And to conclude this video, I want to leave you with this. I did do my due diligence in preparing my usual traditional film analysis for this movie. I could tell you how the title on the poster includes quotations to indicate this is an expression of Emerald's experience with the book rather than a retelling of the book. I could tell you Margot's wardrobe is purposely futuristic to capture the otherworldliness of Edgar's essence through his textile manufacturing business. And I could tell you how the taxidermy dogs, the dolls with real hair, and the bedroom walls representing Catherine's skin are all meant to symbolize the theme of desperately trying to control what is natural and refusing to let go of what is lost. And I could tell you the wet and slimy sounds and visuals of the snail, the fish, and the doe captures Catherine's growing sexual curiosity and infatuation with Heathcliff. But when your screenplay, the backbone of your film, is this shallow, it doesn't matter how pretty your symbolism is. It just feels empty. Therefore, it's a movie that's meant to be enjoyed in the moment, not to be remembered or reflected upon. Not at all like the masterpiece that it's based on. All right, that's my analysis. I hope this video wasn't too challenging or confrontational. I just really needed to get this off of my chest, and I tried initially to do a regular analysis and I just couldn't. And I hope this video explains why. But nonetheless, I really would love to hear your opinions and your perspectives and your maybe insights that I don't have. And I'll finish by saying, if you're new, thank you so much for watching. And if you've been subscribed for a while, thank you again so much for watching this very different kind of video. But thank you so much nonetheless, and I'll see you later.